it's about time that we talk about people. We talk about Christians, Yazidis, and others who are suffering from hatred and terrorism. Here in Jordan, it's very appropriate and timely that we gather and talk about hope for all people.
Refugiații din Orientul Mijlociu nu au apărut peste noapte. Există de secole, dar niciodată atât de mulți ca până acum. În mai puțin de un an, milioane de oameni de diverse confesiuni au părăsit regiunea măcinată de conflicte armate, cărora le cad victime tineri și bătrâni, femei și copii.
Oh God, you see what is happening in this world. Please give us chance to do something, to be sacrificed for the others. Please give us more energy to do what you like for lovely and happiness, for peace, for security, for the life which you like it for us in this world.
Pe teritoriul Regatului Hashemit al Iordaniei, o țară musulmană în care regăsești alături biserici creștine și moschei, există o vale a păcii, valea celui mai renumit râu din lume, Iordanul. Simbol al țării sfinte, Iordanul, care curge sinuos pe alocuri molcom, dar alteori învolburat, spre Marea Moartă, este locul pe care de secole pelerinii creștini din toată lumea îl caută. Traversând o zonă intens disputată de-a lungul vremurilor, având puternice semnificații religioase, râul Iordan este astăzi accesibil credincioșilor. Paradoxal, într-o țară preponderent musulmană, Regatul Hashemit al Iordaniei, sunt create toate condițiile pentru ca pelerinii creștini să poată ajunge la locul sfânt al botezului lui Isus, chiar dacă soldați înarmați stau de pază pe cele două maluri ale râului frontieră. Oare poate reprezenta locul sfânt al botezului Mântuitorului simbolul întoarcerii acasă a creștinilor ce fug din calea urgiei? Este oare Iordanul și astăzi râul salvării, râul speranței? Râul Iordan, în ivrit Iarden, care coboară, este poate cel mai cunoscut râu de pe pământ. Prima hartă în care îl găsim datează din 1585 și ilustrează vremurile lui Isus. Iar o a doua hartă a țării sfinte, realizată pe baza datelor din Vechiul și Noul Testament, indică împărțirea pe numeroase triburi. Istoria avea să demonstreze că orice nouă delimitare a teritoriului iscă la nesfârșit convulsii și conflicte sângeroase. Iordanul parcurge numai puțin de 300 de kilometri printr-o zonă pustie, până la vărsarea în Marea Moartă. Pe malurile lui s-au format cele 12 seminții ale lui Israel, înainte de a intra pe pământul făgăduinței. În Sfânta Scriptură, expresia a trece Iordanul însemna a intra pe pământul lui Dumnezeu. Tot așa, în căutarea unei vieți mai bune, azi sute de mii de refugiați fug spre apus, din calea războiului, a persecuției, a violențelor de neconceput pentru lumea occidentală. Chiar dacă în această regiune a lumii, atât de complicată din punct de vedere istoric și geopolitic, conflictele par a fi de neoprit și rănile de nevindecat, totuși, pe aici curge râul speranței, sfințit pentru totdeauna odată cu botezul pe care Isus l-a primit din mâinile Sfântului Ioan. Astăzi, pe malul Iordanului, pelerinii regăsesc vestigiile unei mănăstiri și ale unor vechi biserici dedicate Sfântului Ioan și botezului lui Isus. În 2015, UNESCO a inclus în Patrimoniul Mondial situl numit Al-Mahtas, însemnând botezul în limba arabă, aflat pe malul de est al Iordanului, aproape de drumul vechi spre Ierusalim, prin Ierihon. A fost identificat drept locul trecerii israeliților peste Iordan, așa cum este descris în cartea lui Iosua. Situl este indicat de două pasaje din Evanghelia lui Ioan, care se referă la Betania, dincolo de Iordan, unde boteza Ioan. Betania de dincolo de Iordan a fost părăsită vreme îndelungată la începuturile ascensiunii islamului în secolul al VII-lea sub conducerea profetului Mohamed. Apoi, în vremea războiului de 6 zile din 1967, a fost în prima linie a conflictului armat. După semnarea tratatului de pace cu Israelul în 1994, zona a fost curățată de mine și este atent protejată de guvernul iordanian. Ulterior au fost ridicate aici mai multe biserici de diferite confesiuni. Pentru creștini, locul botezului lui Isus este al treilea loc sfânt al creștinismului, după Betlehem și Biserica Sfântului Mormânt din Ierusalim. Și sunt numeroase bisericile creștine care își doresc să-și ridice aici propriul edificiu.
Welcome to Jordan, welcome to Holy Jordan, the land of tranquility and peace. Welcome to Jordan, where you see Muslims and Christians pray together, not fighting each other. Welcome to Holy Jordan, where we read in the holy texts, the Holy Bible and the Holy Quran, the verses that call us to love each other.
This is the best country that you could possibly have to raise the issues that are here, to address the refugees and the way the senator gave us the task. He said, you must try to find a way for Christians to be returned to the Middle East. We need them here. It is part of 2,000 years of our culture.
نحن أرجو أن يفهم الغرب عامة أن هذه المنطقة هي مهد حضارات الديانات. هذه المنطقة عاش فيها المسيحيون واليهود والمسلمون في أحياء متمازجة، وبالتالي نحن ننظر إلى أن هذا التعدد هو بالنسبة لنا مصدر إلهام لنا، لأننا نشعر أن الحضارة العربية الإسلامية التي بنيت من كل الأطراف، مسلمين ومسيحيين ويهود، ولذلك ننظر أن إفراغ المنطقة من المسيحيين فيه ضرر كبير لنا قبل يعني لكافة الأطراف بما فيها المسيحيين والمسلمين. لذلك نعتقد أن هذا التنوع الثقافي والحضاري الذي بنيناه سوية طيلة قرون طويلة نحن بأمس الحاجة أن نعيد إلى كما كان، ولذلك نأمل أن يستمر الدعوة إلى أول شيء عدم تهجير المسيحيين من هذه المنطقة والعمل على إعادتهم لنا، لأننا نشعر أننا بحاجة إلى هذا الثراء الثقافي، هذا التنوع، وأيضا لا نقبل في يوم من الأيام أن يكون أهل البلاد وهم من أهل البلاد الأصليين والمواطنين الموجودين طيلة الحياة طيلة قرون طويلة في هذه الأرض أن تكون أرض القدس وأرض الميلاد السيد المسيح أن لا يبقى فيها سوى 5000 مسيحي في القدس. ولذلك نحن نرى أن العودة المسيحيين إلى الشرق هو إثراء لهذا الشرق.
You said about it's not okay moving people around the world because there are homelands here, so we can maybe think about how resettle the Christians, refugees from Europe here.
Sure, I think it's important. I've been a bit outspoken in the U.S. as it relates to moving displaced refugees around the world and transporting them around the world. While it may on the surface look like it's a humanitarian crisis, of course it is, I think it's important to acknowledge that in the refugee camps, which we'll be visiting soon, and I've visited many refugee camps around the world, I think the common thread is that most people don't want to leave the country that they're in. And I know it is complex that they've been forced out of their country, but I think more consideration needs to be about their care as it exists in the region where they live, and in figuring out a way to reacclimate them back into society, whether it's back to the original country of origin or in the region. And I think there's less effort as it relates to reporting in that regard. And I think it's critical to get the voice of the refugees as to their needs.
You are Catholic.
I am.
And please, what can you say about the implication of this of your church in all this multi-faith dialogue about refugees?
Well, I will say this. I met with a very dear friend that to the Archdiocese of Chicago prior to my departure. I explained to him what we were doing, what we were attempting to accomplish here, and he does believe that these types of efforts are the same efforts that the Pope is currently looking forward. Not that I'm representing the Catholic Church, however, I am a Knight of Columbus as well. I do a lot of humanitarian work as it relates to bishops around the world. My involvement is to work with institutions that are relevant around the country and around the world that help folks, with exception to politics. Politics shouldn't be interjected into any of the work that you're doing. My focus has always been on education and helping the children, because I think helping the children and educating the children, they'll be the difference in the world as time goes by.
A couple of the things that we're working on. One is trying to get more aid to the people who need it in the short term, because there's lots of people who need help and they need it now. They need food, they need clothes, and that's one of the things that we focus on. That's most important right now. The second thing is we're trying to work on getting the idea of return more credibility, more strength in the West with government. It's important that we as a civil society speak out and say, this is what we want to see. We've spoken to the people and this is what they want. And incidentally, I mean, if you're a European government, if you're an American government and you're concerned about, people coming to your country, about refugees, this provides sort of a win-win situation for everyone. Many of these people want to return home. Many of these Western governments are worried about bringing in people from the outside. And this idea, this concept of returning home, providing an internationally protected zone for them, is a solution that benefits everyone.
În 2015, Europa s-a trezit pusă în fața unei mișcări de populații nemai văzute de la cel de-al doilea război mondial. 1 milion de suflete au bătut la porțile vestului, un număr totuși prea mare de musafiri neașteptați, marea majoritate provenind din Orientul Mijlociu. Oaspeți nepoftiți pentru democrațiile europene, chiar dacă nu mai era pentru nimeni o noutate, măcelul din cei 5 ani de război sirian și ascensiunea meteorică a statului islamic, o organizație cu ambiții statale care a semănat teroare și dincolo de teritoriile cucerite, lovind chiar în inima Europei. Generozitatea arătată de cancelarul Angela Merkel a pus în dificultate Uniunea Europeană, confruntată cu reacții diverse de la solidaritate nemărginită și compasiune față de refugiați și până la ridicarea de garduri la frontieră. Temerea principală este riscul ca printre imigranți să se strecoare jihadiști dispuși să comită acte teroriste.
Sweden and Germany are the two countries in Europe who have received most refugees and especially most per capita. So this has put quite some pressure on our systems in Sweden. But the churches have been very active in helping. We have provided everything from beds to psychosocial support, meeting places, helping people to start to learn Swedish, supporting with clothes and toys.
În semn de solidaritate cu europenii care au părut complet depășiți de amploarea exodului, Administrația Statelor Unite s-a angajat să preia cel puțin 10.000 de imigranți sirieni. Alți 25.000 de refugiați din taberele din Iordania, Liban și din Turcia vor găsi adăpost în Canada.
Most of the refugees are here in this region and not in Europe. So we need to keep the proportions in mind. And of course we need to have a culture of taking care of people who are in need. I mean, we have done that before in Europe. After World War II, there were lots and lots and lots of refugees, and we had to cope with that. And we do have to cope with that now too, in different ways, helping here in this region and helping the people come to us, being very clear about that the right of asylum is a human right. So they have the right to get their cases looked at. We need to find fair, just, and ways that preserve human dignity to do this. And we also need to know that a number of these people, of course, will want to and need to return to rebuild their countries once there comes peace.
Dacă pentru europeni șocul primirii sutelor de mii de refugiați a fost puternic, pentru iordanieni nu e nimic nou.
طبعا أنا ابن لاجئ والدي هاجر من فلسطين إلى الضفة الشرقية في نهر الأردن إلى مدينة إربد ولدت في مخيم إربد درست في مدارس الأونروا التابعة لوكالة الغوث الدولية. طبعا المخيمات كانت في تلك الفترة تعاني من ظروف صعبة قاسية، سواء كان في الأحوال الجوية السيئة، سواء في ظروف المعيشة، في قلة الموارد، في 3 حكومات متتالية. والآن أنا عين في مجلس الأعيان الأردني الذي هو مجلس السيناتورز.
We start receiving the refugees since 2011 till today, and the total number of the Syrian citizens in Jordan is 1.4 million. Half of them are registered as refugees under UNHCR. So the refugee status, it's around 632,000 Syrian refugees. Jordan is hosting a lot of conferences and meetings regarding Christian, UN agencies, Muslims. All is concentrating to a humanitarian needs and dealing with the refugees as a human being, not as what they are from where or what their background or what are their religion.
Iordania a conferat adăpost pentru refugiați din Siria, Irak și alte țări din regiune sfâșiate de război, dar și resursele ei sunt limitate.
For example, the water issue, Jordan is the second or the third poorest country in the world. Imagine in the Zatari camp, Jordan provide the refugees for more than 4 million liters daily. And some countries, some villages and some cities in Jordan, we can provide this amount of water. For education sector and issue, we have 143,000 students, Syrian students in our public schools for free. We have 70,000 on the waiting list. We cannot observe or have them in our schools, on our university even, because of the infrastructures, because of we don't have enough schools for them. So this is the 2 examples, for example. Hopefully we're moving to the e-learning issue and to establish a cloud for the e-learning to facilitate and have the weapon of education for the Syrian refugees, especially the young people, not to leave them for other weapons. The most important issue is the lack of fund. For example, Jordan present a regional response plan for 2015, around 2.9 billion as a UN agencies and a Jordanian government. We only received 36% of it. Imagine we dealt with the refugee status in 2015 with a 36% only. So the lack of fund is the most challenging issue for us for the whole sectors, education, health, water and sanitation.
Juliana și Robert au creat o coaliție de ONG-uri în Statele Unite pentru a apăra cauza refugiaților din Orientul Mijlociu. Din propria experiență de refugiat, Juliana consideră că în locul unui exod continuu al populațiilor prin lume, ar fi de preferat ca oamenilor să le fie asigurate condiții pentru întoarcerea acasă. În primul rând, protecție internațională.
I'm an Assyrian Catholic. I was born in Iran, and we lived pretty well under the Shah of Iran. We didn't suffer much. He respected the minorities, the rights of minorities. We had the freedom to exercise our religion and practice our religion, the Christian religion in Iran. But in 1979, everything changed, and we suffered a great deal. In fact, I remember my mother was crying outside our door on the street when Shah of Iran left, and these Iranians were on the street chanting, saying, "Death to Shah," and Shah is gone. And so my mother started to cry, and I'll never forget, one of them came up to her and he shook her finger in her face, and his finger in her face, and said, "You dirty Christian, you will see what we will do to you now. Your only protector, your father, is gone." And that's when, and I was only 6 years old, and that image is so vivid in my mind, and that was true. He was really correct in his statement, because everything changed for us. Although we were Christian, we had to submit to Sharia law. We had to cover our hair, we had to cover our bodies, except the face. You could only see our faces. We couldn't wear the cross outside anymore, and I was told, because of my Catholic name, I would burn in hell, and that I wasn't good enough to play with the Muslim kids. So that lasted about 10 years. And finally, my father said, you know, enough is enough. I'm going to get you out of this country. So we went through a series of smugglers. The first smuggler gave the option of dress me in sheep clothing, put me next to real sheep, transfer me through 2 Persian deserts, Iranian deserts, to Pakistan. The smugglers told us, sleep during the day and we'll drive at night. We'll take you to India. And in India, we'll fly you to Germany where your brothers, my brother had been smuggled out the year before. Well, my mother was terrified. She said, no, because prior to myself, a lot of girls who took that route never made it. Then the second smuggler said, okay, we're gonna marry her. I'm gonna marry her. We're gonna destroy all her Christian paperwork. And I'll dress her in Muslim garb, and I'll take her to Germany by plane. And my mother said, well, if she's going to be married to you legally, you're changing her name, you're destroying all her Christian papers, what guarantee do you give me that you're going to divorce my daughter? And he said, if I like her, I won't. So he was a Muslim smuggler. And finally, we fasted and prayed for 2 weeks. And my great aunt contacted me and said, I have a gift for you. And she introduced us to a government agent who worked also as a smuggler because he knew the ins and outs of the government and he knew how to get a fake passport, get a fake visa. So they got me a fake passport and a fake visa to Switzerland. We went to Switzerland, stayed at a monastery for 1 week, and then we met another smuggler who took us over the border to Germany where we sought religious asylum. And we became refugees. We came to the States in 1990.
How much costs you this escape?
It cost my father $25,000. He paid $25,000 for me and $25,000 for my brother. The ministry that I have that raises awareness among Christians in the West really tells them what is the plight, what does it look like, who are these Christians of the Middle East, what is their history like, and what have they gone through. Our kingdom fell Nineveh fell really in 612 before Christ, so 4 centuries before Christ. Our kingdom fell, and we fell under persecution of Persians in the beginning, the Persian Empire. But then the maximum of persecution started when Islam rose, when Islam came about. For the last 14 centuries, we have been massacred, our churches have been burnt, our priests have been killed, beheaded, our women have been taken into sex slavery. This has been going on for a long time. So what you see ISIS do is what ISIS is doing today is nothing new to my people. We've suffered through this for 14 centuries. My own family has given 8 martyrs. 8 of my family members have been killed in a 120-year span. And this is why I'm passionate about this. I think the world needs to start listening to us. We are different ethnically. We're not Arabs, we're not Kurdish, we're ethnically Assyrian, Ninevites. Our language is Aramaic.
Everybody is very aware right now of what's happening with the refugees from the Middle East. And I think there's a lot of concern in Europe about what happens when they arrive in Europe. But the truth is that the problem is in the Middle East. I mean, what's happening right now in the Middle East is truly a civilizational crisis. For the last 100 years, the Middle East has looked one way, and over the next few years, the Middle East is going to transition into something that's very, very different. And the people of the region know that. The people of the region are very aware that everything is very unstable, and people are leaving. It's not just Christians, it's also Muslims. People don't know what the future holds. People think about their families, about their children, and they think, what kind of life will they live in this Syria, this Iraq? And what are the economic opportunities? What is the security situation for them as you know, if they're Christians, as minorities among a seemingly very hostile population? So, you know, the first problem that prevents any sort of easy resolution of the refugee problem is just what's happening in the Middle East right now.
Situația este incendiară în toată regiunea Orientului Mijlociu și nu de ieri de azi. Peste neînțelegerile de natură etnică și ideologică se suprapune ascensiunea grupărilor jihadiste care au reușit să exporte teroare în Occident. Încă din martie 2011, Siria este sfâșiată de un război civil sângeros între grupări sunite care dețin majoritatea și secta șiită alauită a președintelui Bashar al-Assad. Conflictul dintre serviciile de securitate subordonate regimului, forțele opoziției și grupurile teroriste, între care regăsim organizația sunită Daesh sau ISIS, a făcut numai puțin de 250.000 de morți. Iar în Irak, resentimentele dintre guvernul condus de șiiți și comunitățile sunite au contribuit și ele la victoriile statului islamic. Conflictul din Siria a alungat din casele lor 11 milioane de oameni, mai mult de jumătate din populație.
Just imagine, I just want your viewers to imagine this, that the enemy knocks on your door and says, you have three choices. You either convert to Islam, you pay a tax that technically we may or may not protect you during the time of war, or you leave. And if you don't abide by one of these three, you're going to be killed. And your women are going to be taken into slavery. And you pick up and leave. Overnight, the church bells ring, not to invite you to listen to the good word or in good news, but they're notifying you that the enemy is coming. So your whole life is upside down, overnight, has been turned upside down. So it is very critical for people to understand the tragedy of what has happened to these people. This is why my organization, along with Robert's organization, we're advocating to stop the bleeding, to stop displacing people out of these homelands. Those who want to leave, they can leave. As free humans, they should be able to leave. But those who want to stay and preserve their language and culture, we should be able to support. We travel throughout the world and we talk about the plight of the Christians of Iraq and Syria, who these people are, what is their history like, what are they asking for. And we raise money for food, shelter, medicine, because prior to 2003, we were 1.6 million Assyrian Christians in Iraq. Today, we only have 300,000 left. Our history is 6,700 years old. We gave civilization to the world, and today, we've been reduced to live in refugee camps.
As it relates to the current persecution of Christians in the world, I think, as far as my concern is in the United States, there's a bit of a discussion that this is happening. We have a lot of multi-faiths coming together to recognize, for the same reasons, that it isn't just a Christian persecution, it's a persecution of individuals around the world. And I think a lot of these relevant leaders here have had a track record of helping, and the focus has been to work with folks that have that history.
Tell me about the United States' interest in solving this crisis of refugees.
Well, I would suggest this. I think a lot of people in the United States are frightened, and I think they're frightened because of the unknown. And my job has always been to travel to different regions around the world, to go back to speak to people so that they understand the complexity of the situation as it exists. Here in Jordan, I think most Americans would be very surprised that it's very ecumenical, that it's very multi-faith in this region. What they see on the news isn't always reflective of the events that exist in these countries. You know, we're sitting amongst a Christmas tree. I don't think most Americans would even consider that there would be a Christmas tree in Jordan.
We want to send from here the waves of peace based on justice to Jerusalem, that Jerusalem needs peace because there won't be peace in the world without the peace of Jerusalem. Extremism has no religion. Extremism is against humanity, is against God. And this is the reason we want really here to light a tree, to tell the world that religions can live together people of different traditions, religions can give together, and we can celebrate together, and we can be one nation together.
We are the longest standing Christian community in history, non-stop, for 2,000 years. And we lived together as Muslims and Christians for 1,400 years. Living in Jordan, we look around us in this region and we find the bloodshed, terrorism, extremism, ideology. We see this growing. Unfortunately, the victims of this terrorism are the Muslims, the Yazidis, the Sunnis, the Shiites, but also the Christians are victims. We call on all the people of goodwill to come together in order to confront this threat, which is reaching out of the region, going out of the Middle East. You see the threat in Europe, North America, South America, it's everywhere. So it is a responsibility for the international community to protect the Christians here, and when they do this, they are protecting themselves, actually.
Personally, I see more people trying to help than I've ever seen before. And when you do what we did tonight, see a Christmas tree lit as the national Christmas tree of a Muslim country, when you see a senior government official of that country welcoming everybody, wishing everyone a Merry Christmas, you see a wonderful event.
So is Jordan the right place for interfaith dialogue?
Some might say it seems to be the only place right now. Right now, one would argue that they're probably the most stable country in the entire Middle East. Jordan, 7 million people, has never turned down a refugee. They welcome them. It's phenomenal. And they're not very, very wealthy, as I said a few moments ago, but whatever they have, they share. They're wonderful.
There are two schools of thought when one looks at the Middle East in terms of Christianity. One is, let's take everybody out, let's displace them or resettle them in countries like Romania, Albania, Mexico, America. The other school of thought says, no, let's rebuild a homeland for them. So what is the difference? If someone is watching this program, your viewer, if they don't know the region really well, naturally they'll say, let's get them out. Let's get them out of harm's way. Let's bring them. They're Christian. If we're taking Muslims, let's take the Christians and we'll take care of them. The key is that these people, we cannot look at them only as a Christian community, that their history is 2,000 years old. This is an ethnic community that really has the right to have a homeland. Greeks have a homeland they call Greece. Italians have a homeland they call it Italy. So why shouldn't the Assyrians, also known as Chaldeans and Syriacs, depending on what denomination of Christianity they follow, why shouldn't they have that right to be able to go back home?
This problem cannot be solved without the help of the West. And I think particularly the American and European churches, religious leaders, have a role to play here. They have a moral voice, they have a religious voice, they have something to say to this conflict. As the forces of evil, of tyranny, of imperialism are taking over the Middle East, it is precisely the religious leaders who should be speaking out.
Reacția internațională la conflictul din Siria nu a fost doar ezitantă, ci total ineficientă, câtă vreme mari actori au păreri divergente în privința implicării într-o ofensivă decisivă. În vreme ce o coaliție în care regăsim Statele Unite, Marea Britanie și Franța, dar și Iordania, Qatar, Arabia Saudită și Turcia, efectuează de mai bine de un an raiduri aeriene în Siria și Irak vizând pozițiile ISIS, la sfârșitul lunii septembrie, Rusia a lansat raiduri aeriene în Siria pentru susținerea regimului Bashar al-Assad.
There are many voices saying that the Third World War has begun in Syria. What's your opinion about this?
We hear from very reasonable and good people the whole discussion of a Third World War. I don't think that that's what you see there. I see what you see is the adjustment or the readjustment of political thoughts, religious thoughts, and boundaries that have been pressed to the breaking point. Sometimes by very nasty people, ISIS, and sometimes by simple years of neglect. I don't think that's the Third World War.
Statele Unite și NATO acuză Rusia că atacă poziții ale insurgenților susținuți de Occident, însă Moscova susține că vizează exclusiv pozițiile ISIS. În cele din urmă, Consiliul de Securitate al Națiunilor Unite a adoptat rezoluția care prevede lansarea procesului de pace în Siria în ianuarie 2016, printr-un armistițiu și negociere ale administrației Bashar al-Assad cu opoziția moderată.
How do you see the future of the Middle East region?
If I could honestly, if I honestly understood that, I'd be very well off. It's going to get worse before it gets better. There's instability in many parts of the Middle East, driven by politics, money, religion, all the best parts of the world and the worst parts of the world in competition right now. That's gonna have to work itself out with the world's help. Sometimes we'll be called upon to be the referee, and I'd prefer that we be called upon to be the referee and not think that we have to go in and be the referee. There's a difference. If you're called upon, you're welcome. If you're not, even if you do the right thing, you're doing it with people having a very tight look to see if you're not doing it for some other reason. After this is over with, after the near term, I honestly see things much better. Why? Because for the first time in my long life, I see Muslims and Christians and Jews talking on ways to try to find a solution. And I don't mean talking in just the wonderful academic places of the world. I mean talking on the street, talking together, basically demanding their governments do something reasonable. That's all good. I've never seen this much willingness. And in the last few days, you might have seen it here. Muslim and Christian absolutely working very close. And I had a chance to spend a little while with some others, with the Prime Minister today of Jordan. And of course, he began with, we want to keep our Christians. We want those that are refugees in Jordan. And Jordan it's a little country, and it supports 100% of the refugees, which are in the hundreds of thousands, and they pay 60% of the bill. The international community has stepped in, but only with about 40% as they see it. But they begin with, we want to keep our Christians because it's part of our culture. It's part of our nation. They're our citizens. They're the people down the street or across the street. They want them.
General Patrick Ray, folks that I came with, have a history of working with multi-faith organizations and actually moving some efforts, concrete efforts forward. I think there's going to be a mindset here that this is not just a meeting. This is going to be action. Let General Patrick Ray, the head of the Templars, enter to this, but they have a seat on the United Nations, so they have a voice. And I think a voice is important from these institutions to move forward some policy.
The Templars hoped that by helping put this meeting together with Father Hadid, that we would open a forum of dialogue between Christians and Jews, among political and religious people, to open the dialogue to begin a solution. This is one in a series of steps that's going to be necessary to reach our goal. The Templar organization has been in existence for hundreds of years. It's currently in 19 countries, including your country, Romania. We have a commandery in Bucharest, and it's moving towards priory status. What we are attempting to do is to use our contacts within the United Nations, both in New York and Geneva and Vienna, to use that as a forum to help open a productive path to returning Christians. I think the organization is basically a bridge-building tool that can be used by religious and political figures to increase dialogue and bring people together. our contacts within countries around the world and our contacts within the religious community help us to bring together individuals and hopefully reach a solution to this problem.
Why do you Americans, are you so effective?
Well, I think that Americans tend to be generous a lot of the time, and we tend to want to help. The NGOs that are working in the camps here in Jordan have really given an awful lot of outreach to the people. And I think that's going to continue. I think that the NGOs oftentimes are not restricted by as much government bureaucracy and are a little bit quicker to respond and a little faster to get out there and do things. And that's what the Templars, one of the advantages we have is we can talk to different people and we're unrestricted by political control. We really don't have a political agenda. We're here to try to help those in need.
There is a monetary component, as there always is, as it relates to humanitarian crisis. However, time, talent, and treasure is critical, I think, to get people involved, to have a voice. Sends a greater message than just sending money for some of these humanitarian crises. Of course, it requires money, but it requires a change of mindset. It requires a talent from people that have a means to help institutions work together, religions work together, governments to work together. So, you know, throwing money at this is, I think, only continues the cycle. I do believe that there's a component to that, but I think it's important to get a lot of the minds together to help. And not just governments, individuals, citizens in the US, you know, individual citizens around the world, they have the voice, they have the means to change. And until their governments hear it from their people, there won't be change.
Dincolo de jocurile politice pe tabla de șah a Orientului Mijlociu, care acum au forțat milioane de oameni să ia calea pribegiei, cert este că rețeaua teroristă Statul Islamic ocupă regiuni din Irak, Siria, Libia și Egipt și nu pare deloc înfrântă.
Most of the folks in the region are taking sides, and I'm talking about the US. And I don't know if there's a side to be taken in that regard because it's political. And from my standpoint, we don't want to interject politics, although politics has a lot to do with what's happening in the region. But I think as far as it relates to NATO, I think there needs to be a better effort to secure the region in Syria so that we don't have so much displaced refugees.
Pentru creștini, vremurile tulburi nu s-au încheiat, iar visul lor de a se întoarce acasă pare tot mai îndepărtat.
It is not easy to go back because, as you know, just one very obvious point is that ISIS controls a large part of Iraq and Syria. There are other factions, there are other militias that control other parts. And so if you're a Christian and you think about returning home, there are lots of people standing in your way. There's also a sort of regional war going on between powers like Iran and Turkey and Saudi Arabia over who will control this region. And Christians are caught in the middle. And for them to go home means that they will be caught between 3 or 4 different groups that hate each other.
Our national dream is to have a homeland again. Our homeland is in northern Iraq, southern Turkey, and northeast Syria. So we want to go back home to northern Iraq.
There is a real problem of jobs, of money. Even if ISIS is defeated tomorrow, and I'm a Christian and I want to go back to the Nineveh Plain, which is the historic homeland of the Assyrian people, where am I going to work? You know, where am I going to be a doctor? Where am I going to be a lawyer? I have much better opportunity in Europe. And so there's a series of obstacles that stand in the way to a very sort of robust Christian presence in the land. And I think that until those obstacles are confronted, that it will be very difficult for them.
What does the return look like? Again, ISIS must be defeated. World powers such as America and European Parliament have to really understand the situation, come alongside of either the Iraqi government if Iraq stays intact or the Kurdish government and say, we know these people want to return home. We know Nineveh Plain is a disputed land, meaning Kurds say this is ours, Baghdad says this is ours. So there has to be an intervention from the West that says we have to resolve this disputed land. There are hundreds of thousands of people from outside who have already been settled, such as myself, years ago in the West that would love to return home, touch that ground, take that soil in our hands, take that piece of stone and place it against our hearts and say, this is where our ancestors are buried.
الأمن والاستقرار في العالم متوازن يجب أن يكون، ويجب أن ننظر أن ما تعاني من هذه المنطقة من ويلات للحروب والدمار والقتل والاحتلالات والاستيطان وعدم حل المشاكل المستعصية وأهمها القضية الفلسطينية، على رأس القضية الفلسطينية وأيضا تركيز قضايا الفقر والبطالة الموجودة في هذه المنطقة. يجب أن يكون هناك نظرة شاملة لحل مشاكل المنطقة بشكل كامل، وتأتي الحصيلة النهائية أن هذه التنظيمات ستتساقط تلقائيا من أول تفاهمات تجري بين المكونات على ضفتي البحر المتوسط. لا يجوز أن تبقى أوروبا الغنية التي تمتلك الثروات والغرب الغني أن يجاور بيئة حاضنة فقيرة. هذا لذلك أعتقد أنه من الواجب أن تكون هناك خطط تنموية، خطط عملية للحوار والبناء، سواء كان على الصعود الاقتصادية أو الاجتماعية، ومن ثم يجب علينا أن نسعى جميعا إلى تعزيز الديمقراطيات، تعزيز الحريات، أن نكون أن لا نلتفت إلى المصالح الضيقة المتمثلة فقط في برميل النفط وفي تجارة السلاح في بعض الأحيان، وأن لا تكون اللوبيات الداعمة لقوى العناصر والتطرف هي السائدة في منطقتنا.
Everybody wants to help the sort of Christians of Iraq and Syria, and the reality is that many of these people actually live next door to you. If you're in Romania, if you're in Chicago, if you're in Sweden, there are probably Assyrians, Syriacs, Chaldeans living down the street from you or in the next town from you. And I think so many Westerners want to help, they don't actually think that they can help somebody in their own backyard.
Which is the United States' interest here in the region?
The first interest is stability. Very close to that one is a sense of equity, finding a transparent and solid way to assure that everyone is treated equally, that their human rights are protected, and that their futures are as bright as they can possibly be. And if they're not, then today's world will find not just the Middle East, but any place in the world that goes sour, where a country goes sour, the futures are not good, people will leave in large numbers.
Is there any chance that the United States, European Union and the Arabic countries reach to a solution for refugees for short term?
I think the answer to that is yes, because I don't think they have an option. They're going to have to come to grips with this. Somebody might say it isn't our problem, and the answer is not today, but tomorrow it will be.